Okay, so now that you've got that shape, I've just deleted my shape. I'm starting fresh. What we're going to do now is we're going to explore the pen tool and the basics of how it works. Okay, so with our swatches selected, we're just making red shapes right now. So we're going to do the most basic thing with the pen tool, which is start a new path. So you click, that creates an anchor point, and then if you just click and let go, it's going to now automatically draw a straight line between the 2 points. So that's called a path. Okay, so there's one line. You can then go on to do the next one. And then what you do there is what you're seeing is when I click that little O that pops up there, that's called closing the shape or closing the path. And that's generally what we're doing. So now Illustrator is ready to start drawing a new path. Now one of the things you might notice that you might not be seeing is that there's a little pink text popping up here, anchor, path, and it draws a line 90 degrees or whatever. Those are what are called smart guides, and they have a time and a place. I like to use them on most of the time, so if you want to see those, go to the view menu, scroll way down, you'll find this, smart guides. I've also got snap to pixel and snap to point turned on. Now depending on your snap settings, this might not happen, but mostly we don't want two at the same time. They can conflict with each other. So generally if we want to turn it off, we just select it, and I just leave snap to point should be selected. But you can even turn that off so that there's no real snapping at all. It doesn't really matter. Smart guides kind of do the same thing. So just make yourself a few shapes. You know, that's how you can make triangles, although you can't, it's not quite so easy to make like a perfect right angle triangle or whatever, although you can do that with a few basic things. So one thing you can also do with the pen tool is hold down the shift key, which will force 45 degrees or 90 degrees. Say you want to do a right angle, it's pretty easy to do. If you hold down the shift key for your first two lines, it'll just close that shape. There you go. Still not super sure why one of the primitives wouldn't be a triangle, but it's not. Okay, so that's making straight lines. So the next thing where the pen tool really shines is in these custom curves or these Bezier curves. So there's a couple of different ways you can start off a shape. You can click and drag to create two handles. Now instead of drawing a straight line to your next point, it's going to create a Bezier curve. So that's an averaged curve that does the math for you. If you were trained in traditional drafting, you knew this is what French curves were all about. Adobe Illustrator is kind of an on-the-fly French curve generator, but it doesn't really show you those things, so it can be a little freeform. But that's what a basic Bezier curve is. So if I were to click and drag to make those first two handles and then click and drag again, I'm now getting a sequence of curves. This is what the real practice of working with the pen tool comes down to, is getting really comfortable with drawing these curves. So that's a shape made with nothing but Bezier curves. As I mentioned, there's this curvature tool that does pretty much the same thing. I'm just going to delete this shape. You guys can try this out too. Click this. Now you'll notice here that you click your dot, it doesn't give you that line. It just now draws a straight line, but then as you move your mouse, previews that curve for you. So the curvature tool just doesn't let you make straight lines. It links curves together automatically and optimizes them. And it'll close out that curve like that. So if you really want just curved shapes with no accidental angles, the curvature tool is pretty useful. But again, you can do the same thing with the pen tool pretty easily. It's just a little bit of extra clicking. Click, drag, click, drag. And in that particular case, I didn't follow the curve because I didn't start with a straight line. So that gives me a little more flexibility in terms of how that closes out. So that's your next little practice run, is just mess around with these things. Practice making straight lines, curved lines, combination of straight and curved lines. Notice the difference between clicking and holding, clicking and dragging. There's also one other thing too that we do really regularly, is if we want to go from a curve to a straight, we can close the curve. So we click right there on the anchor, and then that allows us to shift gears to a straight. If we want to go back to curves, click and drag to add a handle, so on and so forth. So creating a string of closed curves can be a thing we do really regularly in Illustrator. So also practice doing that. So have a little bit of fun, maybe make yourself a little Pac-Man or something like that, and we'll come back to the next video.